Today we're going to replace the clock spring on this 2006 Ford Fusion, but I'm going to share some general tips that really apply to all clock spring replacements. So first off, I've got the new clock spring here and I've removed it out of the box, and very importantly, you'll notice there's a lock here holding it in place. That's going to keep it from rotating. Remember, what this clock spring essentially does is it transfers electrical signals through the steering wheel here. So as you rotate the wheel, we still get the communication to these steering wheel control buttons and, most importantly, our airbag. So this has to be clocked properly. If you spin it too many times in one direction or the other, it's going to snap and be damaged. So when I open up the package, got my new clock spring here, it's got the lock still in place. And I'm not going to touch it until I'm doing my final installation. Once everything's lined up in place, then I'll remove the lock and set it free. So for the moment, I'm going to set that off to the side. Now you may also notice something strange on my wrist. This is nothing more than a grounding strap. So I'm going to take this and clip it to a safe ground on the vehicle. And so what that's going to do the whole time I'm working on this, it's actually got a metal button that goes up against my wrist, and now it's going to protect my body. So as I'm moving on the seats here or moving inside the vehicle, I don't want the chance of any static electricity getting to the airbag and potentially deploying it. That would certainly be a bad day. While we're on the topic of safety, I've already gone ahead and disconnected the battery. There's different ways of doing this. Some manufacturers will say, just go ahead and remove the restraints control module fuse and let it power down for an extended period of time. Others will say, just go ahead and disconnect the battery. Now, of course, when I disconnect the battery, I could be wiping out all sorts of different memory and different modules, such as the radio, the engine control module, etc. But again, safety first. We really don't want this bag blowing off in our face. So I've disconnected the battery, let this thing power down for an extended amount of time, so there's no residual power stored in any of the modules here. And now that I've got my wrist protection on, I'm ready to jump in and remove this. I need to remove the upper and lower shrouds and then access the two anchors for the airbag here. Every vehicle is going to be a little different. Some of them you can actually get at some bolts on the backside here. You're going to have to turn the wheel one direction or the other to get at it. This particular one, it recommends using an Allen wrench and getting to some clips on the back and release them. Why an Allen wrench? Well, typically because it's dull and I can reach into the long spot there. So I've got the key in the accessory position, allows me to rotate this, and again, no harm because the battery's been disconnected. So let me get things removed here, and I'm going to pick it up again when I'm ready to remove the airbag off the vehicle. Well, now that I've used my Allen wrench in the access holes on both sides here, I pulled the top and bottom covers off the steering column. There's just 3 Phillips screws holding that in place. And so now my airbag is loose. Now I need to take a little 90-degree pick and release the locks on these connectors here. These are locked in place, so we don't want to just snap them off. So very carefully, I'm going to lift that lock up there, and then that's going to release the connector. And you can see they're color-coded for our convenience, so we put them back in the same place. There. Now my airbag is off the vehicle and out of the way. Now I really don't need my static strap either, because really the real danger we could do here is with the airbag. Now I'm up to the steering wheel here. Got to remove the nut and we get the steering wheel off and access my clock spring. Okay, so I've got the nut off the steering wheel here. On this particular one, I had to go ahead and use a steering wheel puller. This is pressed onto a tapered shaft here. One important note is to ensure before I remove the wheel that the vehicle is straight, so the front wheels are going straight, and that the steering wheel is centered. We want everything to be perfectly centered for disassembly and then reassembly. So now I've got it loose there. I can slide my wheel back, and you see how the steering wheel controls are going to be mounted into the clock spring here. So I have to kind of flip it over and release that part of it. And then we've simply got the airbag wires here. So I can set my wheel aside. Now we see we've got our main connection here going to the clock spring. Then we've simply got two little screws holding it in place. But you'll notice this clock spring that's on here, see, it's unlocked, as it should be. And it's able to rotate. That's why our new one here has this lock in place, so it's not able to rotate. We don't want to, overextend it here by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm going to go ahead, remove my two screws. Then we mount our new clock spring. We'll run the wires through. Once we're ready to put the steering wheel back on, then I will go ahead and unlock it and allow it to rotate. So I'm just going to use a T20 to remove these two little screws holding the clock spring in place. So once I've got those off, we've got our clock spring out and ready to be discarded. So I'm simply going to reverse the procedure here, and I've got my new one in place, and we'll get it mounted down. Okay, now it's snugged in place. I can plug it in right here. Notice it's still locked in place, and we've got our alignment tabs there going to help us align it on the back side of the steering wheel here. So now I can run my two airbag wires through the opening in the top of the steering wheel. I'm also going to have my locking tab kind of come up through there. And at the same time, I have to sneak around the back side and plug in the steering wheel controls here. So once that's clipped into place, I can slide my wheel down, align my two tabs on the clock spring. My steering wheel slid back into place here. Now everything it's secured. Now I can safely go ahead and remove the locking device here, which is going to allow my clock spring to rotate now as everything's designed. So let me go ahead, install the nut here, and then I'll be ready to put the airbag back in place. Okay, well, we've got the steering wheel mounted back in place, got the covers back on the steering column now, and I've gone ahead and put my static strap back on. Now we're ready to grab the airbag here, and this is where, again, I'm use caution. As I'm sliding across the seat here, I don't want to build up any static electricity that might inadvertently set off this bag while it's in my hand or too close to my face. So with everything back in place here, I'm going to plug in my connectors, color code it again, and then lock them in place so they're not coming out. So got the orange one in, connect the yellow, lock it in, and we'll line up our tabs on the airbag and click it into place. Now it's locked in there. So the job is almost done. Now remember, we started out by disconnecting the battery. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the battery. Then we're going to come back and make sure that everything is operating properly. Then we'll call the job done. Now we're ready for the moment of truth. I've gone ahead and hooked up the battery. Turn the key to the run position. Turn off the radio here a second. And watch, the airbag light was on for a few seconds, then went off. So we've corrected our circuit error, and we want to verify that our steering wheel control buttons also work, and they appear to be working just fine. So we're going to call this job a success. Hopefully now you have a better idea of what it takes to do a typical clock spring installation.